Okay, here we are, still at, let's see, Cynoscephalae? Yeah, how about that? Probably Cynoscephalae, though, actually. I'm just thinking I don't think that's a Greek sound. I don't know what the C, I don't remember ever seeing type sounds there from C's. I don't know. Usually it's the K. Anyway. Not that I would know. We started off with the Romans launching an attack around the flank, and they drove one of these phalanxes off. They also hit head on into this one, which was kind of an iffy thing. I said, I want to try to pry my way through. And maybe I got the advantage, and I did a decent amount of damage. Well, no, I didn't. I did not do a decent amount of damage. I did a decent amount of damage to the Romans, and one of them who didn't hit that, who hit this unit, ran away. They got a continuation, though, with that crappy little leader. And that was a definite no-no. I was kind of silly, actually. I tried to trump in with this guy, but he succeeded and went in and rallied some of his horses. He didn't get a continuation. But that was probably a really dumb move. Anyway, I'm on to the other twos, I guess. I've found it's very difficult when I have so many twos and they're spread out, or so many low-valued twos, threes, whatever, to catch them all. So the twos, especially because I haven't, I walk away for a while and then I come back, and bang, wow, two of them, that's probably what I got now. I got a third one over here. So sometimes I have to catch up with somebody. I don't think it's a bad thing at all. Yes, I'm violating the strict rules the strict rules of the game, but it doesn't really make a bit of difference, to tell you the truth. Alright. And again, the little breaks in the line that happen just from fighting with phalanxes, it's just too easy. The Romans slip into those cracks, and they break them, and we got two phalanxes flying back here, just like, I was hoping to do here. Yeah, I got one fair crack in, but I was hoping to get a follow-up and hit this guy. It's just an ugly situation for these, and there's no real way out of it, because you can come in at an oblique and kind of ignore the zone of control as you march in and strike another unit, and that's just what's happening here. They also drove back a heavy as well. And just, smashing them one at a time, they're very easy to drive out of there. The only thing that they have as their advantage is when they're standing in a defensive line. They're not bad if they go slamming into other phalanxes, but that's head-to-head. But in a defensive line, end-to-end, with no cracks, yeah, it's trivial. You can't break that thing. I mean, it's really easy to defend yourself. You have to go around it. Well, it tends to be pretty immobile, so going around it's pretty easy. You just have to deal with whatever lights are protecting it. On the other side, if it pushes forward, if it attacks, if it tries to use its mass, it breaks apart. It loses some of its cohesive defenses. You try to throw little pieces in to fill in those gaps, etc., as I've got here, and yeah, it helps. But there's going to be breaks in the line somewhere, especially when you have a solid line of phalanxes. And they just can't hold up. I think it's going to be a lot more interesting when we take a look at the Alexander the Great, not the Conquerors, but the Alexander Great Battles of History version. Because, well, the phalanx was the god at that point. We'll see just how well it holds up against, heavy infantries or whatever. Right here, though, against the Roman legions, it just doesn't have the capability. And one good solid hit on the Macedonian right flank, and it just dissolved. Everything's routing. Basically, those heavies, they can't withstand. They can't defend against the Romans. And likewise, we saw this hit in the center. So it's pretty much over here. It looked like this was going to be the weaker spot for a little bit, but no, this is pretty cleared up. And Philip, hey, he might be able to rally people, bring them back in. He's got a good initiative, so he's pretty good at doing that. But, you're just going to see it happen again and again, and he'll fail sometimes. There's no question some of those Roman units might end up breaking too, but you see a few of them here. But for the most part, they just have all the advantages here. And there isn't a lot of point difference here. The Macedonian light units actually did quite a number on the Romans, swooping down from the hill, drove a few off, cut around here. It's one of the advantages. The lights, they're not more maneuverable than the legions, but they're still as maneuverable, which means more or less, not quite. But it means that they can slip around and do stuff like that, the kind of stuff that the legion's doing to the phalanxes. So it's a more even fight with the lighter units. The phalanxes, they look impressive. They really do, especially when you're facing charging right at the front of one. If you're thinking about that, think again, because it's not pleasant, you know. If you can go up and send your velites forward and just harass it and force it to make the attack, then their line will be broken. You can demolish it. But if you go up and just try to hit it and allow it to remain on the defense, no chance. Onward. So we're at the end of the turn. Flaminius pulled some of his forces forward, and I don't know. Oh, he didn't get a momentum. And I began to think, well, actually he got one, but he got trumped. And I began to think, wow, there's an unfairness built into this scenario, at least, which may be kind of unintentional. It's sort of this weird thing that doesn't really, you know, devolve from, oh yeah, this leader's better than this leader or whatever. The simple fact that there are good subordinates for Philip that are better ranked than any of the Roman subordinates means that Philip can hold off. If he doesn't trump in with either of those, he'll get one of them before Flaminius goes, just before Flaminius goes, and then, it's not a terrible thing for it to be this, but the balance can go, you know, all the way down the line to who has the extra 2-point leader or something, which gets a little silly if there's matching all the way down the line. Anyway, the fact that he has more of these 5-point initiative leaders means that Flaminius has to go before him in general. Now, Flaminius could trump in, but he still has to go before. The only time that Flaminius won't go first is if Philip trumps in, which hasn't been happening much. He's got better leaders, so he doesn't need to. But what it does mean is that Philip gets to go last, which means he can trump in, which is, his trumping is more successful than anyone else's except Flaminius's, on Flaminius, and prevent Flaminius from getting a momentum. And thus, it's more likely that Philip will get a momentum. It's also more likely that Philip will get no turn, though, by taking that kind of risk. But it's just something that you got to kind of keep in mind. It works fine when one leader's clearly better than the other, but here they're ranked the same, so it's a little weird. You kind of think, does it really make sense? Well, maybe that having a couple of decent subordinates gives you that edge. Maybe. All right. I got some units to route. I've got a couple, including a big phalanx to take off. So that's going to be 20 more points, 98. Luckily he rallied most of his forces, but he's getting within the 1 or 2 turns. You know, one decent turn, not even a big turn, could finish the Macedonians off. No additional points when, so I can calculate these suckers. What did I say? 20 points. We're up to 98. Now, one thing I was thinking, I don't think I've mentioned before, these epirots, I don't know where to put them there, is these games are usually decided very, very early on. In fact, you know, I mean, very soon after the initial clash, I could tell, hey, I think the Romans have this in the bag already. They have a slight edge, but you know, very quickly you see the battle usually turn. It's very seldomly down to the wire. In fact, somebody was talking about one where both sides were going to break about the same time. Those are the ones I love. It just came down to who got lucky and broke the other person, but very few of them are like that. Some of them, it's because of the unbalance, which I've certainly talked about. But some of them even when the balance is there, or the unbalance goes the other way, sometimes a bit of big lucky breaks early in the battle can swing the whole thing. And that kind of an interesting feeling, except that at this point, if you were playing this opposed, if you're the Macedonians, quite a while ago you would have said, okay, let's play another game, right? It's like the decision was made very early in this game. And that's often the case. So it's kind of like, it's great solo gaming. Same thing with the fiddly aspect. All the pieces I gotta flip each turn. I got no problem with that solo. But when you play it opposed, it maybe doesn't feel quite as interesting. Different kinds of gaming. I like it. And another one of those turns that ended before it began. One activation by one of these 2-point dudes. What does that mean? Well, that means a lot of these Romans that are routing may be having trouble. At least this guy looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He's off the map. That's a good 13 points there. I don't think it's enough to really sway the game, but it's kind of an interesting factor. We'll see. And for the Romans, they were able to launch an attack then with that same leader right away. Charging and trying a flank attack here, which didn't really work. He got routed, not on the approach, but in the battle itself. Whereas this guy, though, routed the phalanx that he hit. Now that kind of opens it up and makes it easier to hit this phalanx and drive it through those hoplites and then hit the hoplites. And it's just this problem. Well, why didn't Philip try to trump in? Well, actually he did, and he failed. And yeah, that's kind of a problem. So, not only is his center destroyed, but he's not going to get any action. He's not going to get a chance to rally this. All we got is this guy over on that side. And the Macedonian cav launched its way up the hill, drove one legion back. Now that got rallied. This guy went next. Our tribune Antonius rallied that unit and launched an attack onto the lights, driving them back. Basically, this is a tangled fight, but there's one thing. The Romans have this in the hall that's going to come slamming into the rear of those Macedonian cav. Whenever cav goes against cav, and the Macedonians couldn't quite reach and get a flank attack, whenever cav goes against cav, there's a chance you're driving them away. You're just going to totally destroy them, chasing them, ending up off the board, of course, but that's not so bad when, you're taking out another unit for it. So, thus cav are really a threat to the Roman side. We're seeing they're kind of breaking up this part of the attack. This part broke through. There's not much left to it, though. So, it's kind of like still not a terribly unbalanced battlefield scenario, even if this looks unbalanced. Then we got another Roman unit dead here. Not quite enough movement points to get there, and now he's exposed for this one. Ouch. I had to bring him up, but yeah. On the other side here, who's this? Magnus. Trying to bring his forces into play, and he smacked into some of these lighter units up on the hill, and drove one away. Kind of got stymied by the other. The height advantage was a problem. Anyway, I think we're mainly on to the good Macedonian leaders now. Had a nice little storm here. Heard some, maybe didn't hear it during the last video. I had the window shut, but it was like water coming from the sky and all kind of weird things happened. Anyway, over here we saw the Macedonians kind of push back with this leader, but after that I noticed, hey, I forgot about him, and triggered off one of the cav to smack in, and drove away, and actually pursued to death a light unit that was causing some routing back here. Alright, well, now we're actually down to the big guys, but one of them's already gone. Actually, all we've got is one Macedonian and then our Flaminius. And after that, well, we're going to be at 110, which means if there's 5 more lost somehow, and I don't think that's likely, there aren't cav, Flaminius isn't going to be triggering anything, but if 5 more can be lost, say a failed rally of one of these units, which is quite possible. This battle's over. Well, I was expecting the game to be over, actually, assuming one of those failed, but it's not the case. I was mistaken about the point values, and I may have screwed up earlier. This is actually not worth 11. It's worth only 7, because that's a skirmisher. They're only worth 2. But let's take a look at what else is on the board and what else moved. Kind of had some fighting, and the rallies were successful, as you see. Something went in here, killed a couple of Roman legion units. You see, we're beginning to see a pile up of those. We've got 18, 25, 70. That's going to put us 84. The Romans are almost as high as the Macedonians now. That kind of tactical disadvantage that showed at certain points, well, it managed to catch a couple of units and really do some damage. We've got some more routing here. Flaminius had to run over and rally all his troops to prevent this from becoming an uglier, really ugly situation. And luckily he's pretty good at that. Anyway, I guess I'm going to load this one up. The next one might be very short, but I've got kind of some bandwidth opening up very shortly. Alright, so here we are on another turn. My camera zoom is being kind of cranky. Anyway, I've noticed this recently. Romans used their kind of 2-point leaders to run around trying to rally the cohort units because primarily because that's about all they had left. They'd really kind of broken their units. We've actually shifted 2 of them over here, and one of them's kicking around. Somewhere over here he made an attack, I think. Nah, just a rallying action. Now, a couple of Roman units that were in place to attack over here at a flank attack, but in each case I took a rallying action because there was a chance the Romans could just turn and run, a fair chance, upon hitting the flank. So in each of those cases there was not a continuation. I think there was one down here, but it got trumped over here. And then, yeah, they Cav did a rallying action, and then the choice was made to trump with this because it was less important than this Cav. I don't want that to fail. But then he got a continuation, which would have lined up an attack here. So I trumped in with him, and that worked quite well. I've cleared this hill, hit some flank attacks that were kind of painful on the Romans, and there's some good action going on over there. Anyway, this fight is beginning to take on an interesting flavor. The point-wise, 105 to 89, or, whoa, 84, sorry. That's a 59 with a line through it. Okay, yes, the Romans are still in the lead, and yes, they need less route points to fall. Macedonians have to be very careful. They've got probably almost definitely enough to go over here. 14 more points, yeah, that'll send them over. So they got to make sure that phalanx doesn't run off the field. Other than that, though, hey, maybe they got a tiny chance, maybe? I don't know. I doubt it. There's just too much, places like this that can come into play too easily. But we'll see. Well, that's actually pretty much it. The Roman cav slammed in, destroyed a unit, routed the phalanx that was back there. The cav back here also had its action, but that didn't really work out too terribly well. We already covered that, I think. Anyway, then moving the Roman infantry into place after he failed to rally a unit and destroyed it, he slammed this one into the routing phalanx, finishing it off. That's the end of the battle here. This is something someone was complaining about. Oh, that's kind of interesting. The windstorm broke my crawl space. Interesting. All right. Anyway, I didn't even notice that. The points here of 14, 19 points easily puts it over. The question is there anything terribly interesting to have happen here? I've got a lot of fiddly die rolling and rallying and stuff like that I can take into place. But there's no way that I'm going to drive the Romans up the 60 points that they need to be in competition for losing this battle. So I'm going to call this here because I've got a video almost ready. I'm going to tag this to the end of it. A slightly longer video, but a lot better than like a 3-4 minute one. All right, cheers. Hey, you know what? I'm getting confused by that hole in my ceiling. I did forget to do any kind of wrap, so why don't I add that here too? Although I don't want to take a lot of time here because it can only really load up overnight now that I'm working at home. All right, the big issue here, probably the biggest single thing, was my failure to deploy the Macedonians well. This attempt to run them up phalanx first and try to get that deployed quickly in the best terrain, that just didn't work. They needed the cover, they needed the screen. The Romans, you know, even if I think in kind of retrospect, hey, what if I had, you know, succeeded in getting up there a little faster, being a little more clever, not lost some die rolls that I did. Still, the Romans could have pushed harder. That's something, yeah, the phalanx could do too, but inevitably, I think without the supporting units, that phalanx is just too weak. Even if I got it all in place, it could still be too easily outflanked. You've got to rely on your lighter units to protect those flanks, and that's serious error on my side. Anyway, this is kind of an interesting one. I actually think it's one of the better battles out there from having played this now. I think it's fairly balanced, and yes, the phalanxes require a bit more delicacy than I used, but I'd kind of like to give this another shot at some point. More than most of them. Most of them kind of like, you know, it's a battle, it's a battle. I don't care. And it's kind of a hard thing about this whole SPQR and really the great battles of history overall. Unlike something like, and let's take a look over here, Agincourt, for example. Whoa. You know, if I had that in my collection, or all these Civil War games that I have, I kind of look at, oh, I want to play this one battle, or maybe I want to work my way through them. There's just so damn many of these. I don't think I can work my way through them again in my life. But I may pick out certain key ones like this, or NOLA that was very enjoyable, or some of the early ones that, you know, maybe I didn't understand, as I obviously still don't, how to use the phalanxes in the Pyrrhic ones. Anyway, there's a lot of pleasure in this system, and I can keep milking it, I think. All right, up it goes.